Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is a great honour to rise in this House for the first time in debate. I am grateful for the support of my family, friends, volunteers, and of course to the residents of Calgary Forest Lawn for putting their trust in me to represent them in this great House. I immigrated to Calgary Forest Lawn when I was 5 years old and grew up there along with my parents, brother, and sister. I am forever grateful to my parents who sacrificed so much. My mom worked multiple jobs, and my dad worked hard as a taxi driver to provide for my siblings and I. We lived through many racist experiences, which I look back to, and rather than being angry, I use these to help me grow and to teach others important lessons I learned to work through it all. I went to high school here, where I met my beautiful wife and played many different sports. My wife's dedication to me and our 2 daughters is the reason why I'm able to be here. Her endless love and support keep me going every day and reminds me of why I'm here. She really has 3 children she has to put up with and does it with a smile. I am a son of the community and learned many valuable lessons growing up here. This great country provided my family and I the opportunities to succeed, and we are so grateful for that. I would be remiss if I did not also acknowledge the service of the previous member, the late Honourable Deepak O'Brien, who served the residents of Calgary for 22 years until his untimely passing last year. Mr. O'Brien saw a lot of changes through his years in this House. 4 prime ministers, he served in the Harper cabinet and traveled the world. He is missed by many, and his 22 years have set a standard for me to live up to. I also want to pay tribute to a mentor of mine who passed away far too young, the late Honourable Manmeet Bhullar, an amazing MLA and leader. He taught me that seva, or selfless service to community, was the most important aspect of life. Manmeet died doing what he loved and what he taught, helping someone on the side of the highway on his way back to the legislature in Edmonton. His shoes are very big, both in the Northeast and communities at large. My goal is to continue what he started. Turning to the topic at hand, Madam Speaker, the citizenship oath is very close to me and my family, and so many of my friends and constituents. There are 108 languages spoken in Calgary Forest Lawn, so you might guess that many immigrants to Canada live in my area. Truly, I am proud to stand up today as the Member of Parliament for one of Canada's most diverse ridings, a place where people from all over the world call home, and a success story of Canadian multiculturalism. For many of those so privileged to recite the oath of citizenship, the moment is the culmination of a long journey. Some may have fled conflict-ridden countries in search of safety. Others may have fled poverty in search of opportunity. Whatever their story, they carry with them their experiences and cultures as they begin a new chapter with a solemn promise. A promise to bear allegiance to the Queen and to faithfully observe the laws of Canada and fulfill their duties as a Canadian citizen. While short and succinct, the words are not to be taken lightly. I do not believe for a second that any well-intentioned person who recites the oath is taking it lightly. So when an individual promises to faithfully observe the laws of Canada, they are doing just that. They are not promising to obey some laws and not others, as if leisurely browsing a diner's menu for their preferred items. It is implied, indeed obviously understood, that they are promising to obey all laws. This, of course, includes the Constitution, which recognizes and affirms the Aboriginal and treaty rights of First Nations. There are also some practical issues with the wording proposed in the bill. A 2017 National Post article anticipating similar changes to the oath remarked that, quote, Just as with a peace treaty between nation states, there is no real room for individual citizens to uphold or invalidate them." End quote. Also in the article, Michael Coyle, a Western University legal expert on Indigenous land claims and treaty rights, is referenced as saying, quote, "Offhand, I cannot think of how an individual, non-Indigenous Canadian could fail to observe a treaty unless they were acting as a representative of the federal or provincial government." End quote. But if they were, and if I'm not mistaken, in the situation, Indigenous communities can already make a legal claim against the Crown itself. Additionally, what about the Indigenous communities that never signed a treaty with the Crown? The majority of nations in BC are not under a treaty, Madam Speaker. The proposed wording of the statement, as is, would not acknowledge them and may even be perceived as an exclusion. The reality is that the current citizenship oath is fine as is, and that this consideration of additional wording only brings up unnecessary issues. Why then, Madam Speaker, has the Liberal government moved this bill in the infancy of this parliamentary session when there are more pressing issues facing this country? The Liberals are wasting time in having the House debate the wording of an already well-worded oath. There are so many nations around the country that need access to fresh water, employment opportunities. There are daily suicides from the despair, especially in the north. And the Liberals are focused on meaningless virtue signaling. The Liberals would say that it is an important step on the path towards reconciliation. But Canadians see through their endless virtue signaling. Canadians see through the Liberals' desire to mask inaction, at worst obstruction, by fixing an oath that was never broken in the first place. Madam Speaker, the Conservative Party believes in the reconciliation process. After all, it was under the previous Conservative government that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established. But rather than focusing on fixing an unbroken oath, we believe in bringing forward policies that make real and measurable improvements in the lives of Canada's Indigenous peoples. The Liberals have failed to create sustainable economic opportunities for Indigenous people, and there can be no lasting reconciliation without economic reconciliation. The Liberals deliberately delayed approval of the tech project, which was recently pulled by the company due to the Liberals' inaction that created regulatory uncertainty. They held a project hostage, which had the wide support of the local First Nations communities and would provide their children with jobs and opportunities. Within the last 2 weeks, the Liberals' inaction on the blockades has allowed radical protesters, many of whom are not Indigenous, to harm the national economy and threaten the LNG project that has the support of the majority of the Wet'suwet'en people. These blockades are an example of the same blockades the Liberals have been putting up to the energy industry. For the Liberals to claim that they are advancing reconciliation by including additional words in the citizenship oath while hindering legitimate economic projects that provide jobs and opportunity to First Nations communities is ridiculous. Get the federal government out of the way and allow First Nations that want to get out from under the dependency on the government succeed on their own. Thank you.
Questions et commentaires?